If we don't fill in any of the inputs in our register form, but still hit the submit button, in our console we get an error from Firebase, and we shouldn't allow this to happen. We shouldn't be able to send the form data to our backend without first making sure that all of the fields are filled out. So we'll add some form validation within handle submit by adding a conditional where we call the function isFormValid. And only if the form is valid will we allow the data to be sent off to Firebase from the form. So we'll create this isFormValid function, and it'll check for a couple of things. First, we'll execute a function called isFormEmpty to make sure all of our inputs are filled out. If not, we'll throw an error. Otherwise, we'll check to make sure our passwords are valid. And if that's not the case, we'll throw an error in that event too. But if both of these conditions are met, we'll say that our form is valid and return true, allowing our form data to be sent off to Firebase. We'll first create this isFormEmpty function, and within isFormEmpty, which we'll create underneath isFormValid, we want to take each of the input values that are stored within our state object, so we can pass in where we call isFormEmpty the entire state object, and then within the parameters, destructure using object destructuring each of the individual values for our inputs, and check to make sure that there is a value provided to each of them. And we'll do that with a conditional where it'll take the length of the value that was typed in and turn it into its opposite Boolean value. So if we have a length of 0 for any one of these inputs, we'll return from this function true, indicating that our form is not entirely filled out. And to throw an error when we return true from our isFormEmpty function, within isFormValid we'll create a variable called errors set equal to an empty array and an error variable. So we'll assign our error variable to an object with a property of message with the text fill in all fields. And we want to set the state to put that error on an errors array within state. So we'll add that property to our state object, and we'll update that by taking the errors, the empty errors array, and concatenating the error object that we just created. And then we want to return false, indicating that we should not execute handle submit. Then let's create a function that'll check to see if our passwords are valid. So we'll also pass the state object to isPasswordValid, but instead of destructuring all of the values, all of the input values, we'll just grab password and password confirmation. And here we first want to check the length of both of these values. If either password or password confirmation have a length of less than 6, we're going to return false, indicating that our passwords aren't valid. So the passwords that we provide to the form need to be at least 6 characters in length. We also want to check to make sure that our password and password confirmation values are the same. Otherwise, we'll return true if both of those conditions are met. And then to cover the error case, if our password isn't valid, we'll assign the error variable to an object, the property of message in the text of password is invalid, and once again set the state where we set the errors array in state and concatenate error onto our errors array and return false at the end of that as well. Now we can save our changes and test this out, test out our validation. If we hit submit, you don't see any Firebase error in the console anymore. We'll head to our React DevTools and navigate to our register component, pull up the state. In our errors array, we see that we have one new element. It's an object with the message of fill in all fields. And now if we fill in the entire form, but our password confirmation doesn't match our password, we get the error message, password is invalid. And also if our passwords match but they're both too short, we get the same error message. If we don't fill out all the fields, we get fill in all fields again. So it looks like our form validation is working well. Finally, we want to display any errors from our form validation to our user so they know what's going wrong in sending off the form. We'll create a function called display errors to do that. It'll take the errors array that we have in state. We'll use the map method to map over those errors, where we'll take the error value as well as the index of the element that we're iterating over and return a set of p tags. We'll put the key prop on the opening tag set equal to the index, and we'll show them the message with the interpolated value error.message. So underneath our form component, we're going to display any errors, first by checking to see that we have some errors within our errors array, to make sure that the length of the errors array is greater than 0. If that's the case, we're going to show our user a message component with this error prop to give it some error styling. Within it there'll be an h3 with the text of error. Then we'll call our display errors function underneath, where we'll pass in the errors array from state. Now if we destructure errors from state within our render, we can make the path to this a bit shorter. We can just check to see that errors.length is greater than 0 and pass in errors to display errors. We'll save that, head back to our app. If we hit submit, we can see our error message underneath telling us to fill in all the fields. And if we fill in our form such that our password and password confirmations don't match, we'll also get our password error.